Hey guys, what's up? It's Debbie, and I am back with more true crimes of criminal minds. If you haven't been to my channel before, this is a criminal minds / true crime channel. The first half of the episode, I cover a criminal minds episode, and then the second half, I cover a true crime case that is either mentioned in the episode or similar to the episode. If you've been here before, welcome back. I'm glad you're back. I appreciate you. And this week, we're starting season 2. We made it all the way through season 1. And I have a playlist for season 1. So check that out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, all the YouTubey stuff. And let's get started. This is the second part of The Fisher King, which is the cliffhanger of season 1. So now we get to find out what happened. The Fisher King part 2. And I said this last episode. This is the only recap I'm going to give. If you want to know what happened in the first episode, go back and watch the video. But I'm going to redo this part because I did it last week, but you don't really get the full effect of this. It's the Fisher King story from Arthur legend. The Fisher King is a figure in Arthurian legend, the last in a long line of British kings tasked with guarding the Holy Grail. The Fisher King is both the protector and physical embodiment of his lands, but a wound renders him incapable and his kingdom barren. Unable to walk or ride a horse, he is sometimes depicted as spending his time fishing while he awaits a chosen one who can heal him. He believes that his wound can be healed only if Percival asks him a magic question. So that's kind of what this unsub is basing his whole deal on, is this Fisher King. As the second part opens, we see Elle on the jet. The BAU is in the round table room trying to figure out what book will solve the code. They wonder how the unsub knew things like that Nellie Fox was Gideon's hero or that JJ collected butterflies. The team decides to look at the case as they normally would if they didn't have all these clues. They start looking at victimology, and Reed keeps working on figuring out which book they need. Next, we see Elle on the jet again. The pilot is asking her for a case file, and she asks him how she got there. Then we see paramedics working on her. Written in blood on the wall is the word rules. The messenger turns himself in and tries to tell them that he did it because the man told him a girl's life depended on it. They finally get him to admit that the man paid him $1,000 cash to deliver the message. Reed is trying to place where he knew the poem from the music box. He asks Garcia to type it into a search engine, and they discover that it's from a poem called The Parliament of Fowls, written by Chaucer, and he remembers it because it's one of his mom's favorite poems. He also believes that the book they are looking for is from 1963 because of the date on the baseball card that Gideon received. Reed wonders if the author of the book could be John Fowles, and Garcia plugs it into a search engine. They figure out that the book is The Collector, and on the cover is a lock of hair, a skeleton key, and a butterfly. This is a real book, and it's inspired many criminals and serial killers and abductors, and I kind of want to read it, but I don't know. Back in the interrogation room, the messenger says that the man had a big coat on and a hat pulled down to hide his face. But he says that the part he did see was all messed up. Gideon is told that he has a phone call. The only name given is Sir Nafe, Garcia's online game crush. Reed looks at the name and discovers that it's an anagram of Fisher King. Gideon goes to the phone and speaks with the unsub that says Agent Greenaway did not have to die like that. Then we see Elle on the jet with her dead father. Hotch and Gideon go to the hospital and find out that Elle is still alive but in surgery. The paramedics didn't know she was with the FBI because the unsub took her credentials, so the BAU wasn't notified. Hotch locks down her house as a federal crime scene. Reed puts a call into 4 libraries looking for the British 1963 publication of The Collector. A librarian calls him back, and they decipher the book code together. Morgan and JJ go to the home of Rebecca Bryant. They are told by her mother that she was adopted. She was rebellious and a frequent runaway. Her parents and the police had just assumed that she ran away, and that was why no one was looking for her. Her real name is Rebecca Garner. When Reed deciphers the code, he calls the FBI office in Las Vegas to have his mom picked up and brought to the BAU. He thinks that his mom knows the unsub. He writes his mom a letter every day and tells her everything. He thinks that the unsub knew the details about the team because of Reed's letters to his mother. Reed's mom is brought to the BAU and she is furious with Reed. She reminds him how much she hates flying and complains about being arrested by those fascists. Reed explains to her that she is not under arrest. Reed's mom is played by Jane Lynch from Glee. She is amazing. I saw her Christmas show, Christmas Before Last. Amazing. She's so funny, beautiful singing voice. If you guys get a chance, check out her Christmas album. It's amazing. Garcia finds out that most of Rebecca's family died to house fire due to faulty wiring. Her father was able to save her, but he was horribly burned and spent years in a burn unit. At that time, he gave up his parental rights to Rebecca, so she was adopted. Reed has his mother watch the DVD, and she identifies the unsub as Randall Garner. Garcia finally finds the hacker and finds out that it's Randall Garner. Reed's mom tells them that Garner thinks they are all modern-day knights of the Round Table. Then Reed's mother shows them a picture with an address on the back that was delivered to her at the hospital. While Gideon stays at the hospital with Elle, the team goes to the address. Garner asks Reed to ask the question, thinking that Reed is Percival. Reed tells him that a Fisher King wound couldn't be healed. Garner is strapped with explosives. Reed tells Hotch and Morgan to stay back, but not why. Garner blows himself up and the house catches fire. And Reed says, he had a bomb. And Derek said, you don't think that's something that we should have known? Reed realizes that Rebecca is in the basement because in the picture of the house that his mom has, there's a light in the basement window. Reed's like, no, we have to go to the basement. And Derek's like, Reed, the house is on fire. Rebecca's in the basement. The skeleton key that Reed has unlocks her chains and they all get out unscathed. But my question is, wouldn't that skeleton key been in an evidence locker somewhere? Why is Reed still carrying it around in his pocket? Elle has a touching scene with her dad on the jet and tells him that she can't stay. She wakes up in the hospital and is told that she's going to be fine. So that is Fisher King Part 2. So, I had a very hard time trying to figure out what unsub to do for this. Some of the ones that I contemplated doing actually fit better with other episodes. So, just by chance, I found this elementary school bombing that was done by one person. And that's kind of the closest thing that I could find. And this story is nuts. And I have so many questions because there's not a lot of answers about this incident. Poe Elementary School bombing. On September 15th, 1959, in Houston, Texas, shortly after 10 a.m., there was a huge explosion at Poe Elementary School. The police were notified at 10:13. In the neighborhood, Louise Cooley, a nurse with 3 kids in the school, was hosting a meeting of Brownie's parents. They heard the explosion, and Louise rushed to the school. She could not believe the scene in front of her eyes. Just a few minutes earlier, Paul Harold Orgeron, a 49-year-old three-time convict and unemployed tile setter, had tried to enroll his 7-year-old son, Paul Dusty Orgeron, into the second grade at Poe Elementary. He had recently divorced and moved from Altus, Oklahoma. He had no birth certificate or immunization record, so he was told that he needed to get the appropriate paperwork and come back tomorrow. A few minutes later, Principal Doty was told there was a man on the playground acting strangely. Orgeron left and came back with a suitcase. He had his son with him and handed 2 notes to a teacher on the playground. Patricia Johnson, a second grade teacher, was trying to get her class together to go back inside. At the time, there were 125 students on the playground. Orgeron was a second grade dropout and his notes were illegible. The police deciphered the notes as best they could. Note number 1 said, "Please do not get excited over this order I'm giving you. In this suitcase you see in my hand is filled to the top with high explosive. I mean high. Please believe me when I say I have 2 more," and then something illegible, "that are set to go off at 2 times. I do not believe I can kill and not kill what is around me, and I mean my son will go. Do as I say and no one will get hurt. Please, P.H. Orgeron." Note number 2 read, "Do not get the police department yet. I'll tell you when. Please do not get excited over this order I'm giving you. In this suitcase you see in my hand, it filled to the top with high explosive. Please do not make me push this button. That's all I have to do. And also have 2 more cases," and then something else legible, "high explosive that are set to go off at a certain time at 3 different places, so it will be more harm to kill me. So do as I say and no one will get hurt. And I would like to talk about God while waiting for my wife." Johnson told 2 students to go get Principal Ruth Doty and the school custodian, James Montgomery. She sent her other students inside. Orgeron mumbled something about power in a suitcase and will of God. Principal Doty told him to leave, but he said, "I have to follow the kids to second grade." Several teachers noticed the commotion outside and went out to see if they could help. One of these teachers was Mrs. Jenny Coulter. Patricia Johnson saw a doorbell-type button affixed to the case. James Montgomery kept Orgeron from entering the building. Then the suitcase detonated. And I gotta say that these teachers and the custodian and the principal, like, they're all heroes. This could have been so much worse. The suitcase had 6 sticks of dynamite, and another stick was found in Orgeron's vehicle. 6 people were killed. The bomber, Paul Harold Orgeron, 49 years old. Dusty Paul Orgeron, his son, 7 years old. Jenny Catherine Coulter, the teacher, 54 years old. James Arlie Montgomery, 56, the school custodian. William S. Hawes Jr., 7 years old. John Cecil Fitch Jr., 8 years old. William Hawes and John Fitch were excited about recess. They ran ahead of their classmates and ran right into the blast. 18 others were injured. 2 boys, Robert Taylor and Earl Fogler, had to have a leg amputated. One of them grew up to design and make artificial limbs, which I think is pretty cool. The windows on the side of the building facing the playground shattered. The kids were cut by glass, and someone thought that a water heater had exploded. Susan Cooley, a second grader, child of Dr. Cooley and Louise Cooley, had just flushed the toilet and thought that she had caused the explosion by flushing the toilet too hard. Another student thought that it was a nuclear attack. When he heard the fire drill bell, he was relieved because the nuclear attack drill alarm sounded different. Now, this is 1959, and my mom has told me that when she was a kid in school, that they did bomb drills. They'd have to, the alarm would go off and they'd have to get under their desk. So back in the 50s, it was like a real threat. Like they were ready. They did drills to be ready for a nuclear attack. One of the students, sixth grader Larry Schacht, was never convinced that it was a nuclear attack. He thought that it was a nuclear attack that had been all covered up. So, as people do when they have suffered a terrible tragedy, he turned to drugs. So he became a meth addict, and there was some nice benefactor that wanted to help him and paid for him to go to medical school. So he got clean and he became a doctor. And then he became a medical missionary as part of the Jim Jones cult in Guyana. He was the one that mixed the poison into the Kool-Aid. Now, I think this is just a coincidence, but I still find it extremely interesting. And we will talk about the Jim Jones cult in a future episode. Nurse Louise Cooley was the first one on the scene. Her husband was a doctor, and he was on his way downtown to attend a meeting. He heard about the explosion on the radio and turned around and went to the school. When he got there, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. He said that Principal Doty was the epitome of calm. The blast had stripped her of her clothes and broken her legs. As she lay on the ground unable to get up, she gave orders and directed the teachers on what they needed to do. After determining that his 3 children were unharmed, Dr. Cooley went to the hospital where the injured were sent to see if he could help. A maple tree was stripped of its leaves and had clothing and human flesh hanging from the branches. There was a 6-inch deep crater in the blacktop of the playground. A reporter from the Chronicle stated that it was too horrible to describe. The remaining children were all accounted for and the school was evacuated. The Texas National Guard was called out to other elementary schools because they didn't know if the bomber had been killed or if he slipped away in the chaos. Later, Orgeron's hand was found in a bush and it was identified with fingerprints. This was not my purpose for doing this case, but I found a very interesting article that talked about the way we view school tragedies in this day and age. And one quote from the article that I found extremely interesting is this: Are the times we live in now really messier and more painful than times past? Or do they only seem so because now we admit the pain? What if the tragedies themselves are a constant? What if the only thing that changes is our reaction to them? HoustoniaMag.com is the site, and the name of the article is Suffer the Children. Oh, we got a cattail. Way too much info to cover the whole article, but what it boils down to is that there was no internet back then. The whole world didn't mourn as it did for Columbine, Sandy Hook, and Parkland. The only mourning was local. There was no grief counseling. The kids went back to school the next day. Mrs. Coulter's class had a substitute teacher the next day. Susan Cooley was just told that her beloved teacher was in heaven and that she would get a new teacher. The next day, half of the students weren't at school, but the number of students increased daily. One student never attended the school again and moved to California. His family never spoke of it, so to this day, he has no idea if the move was prompted because of the bombing or not. The article goes on to say that these types of tragedies are constant and that our reaction to them is what is different. Let me know what you think in the comments. I have so many questions about this case. He was a safecracker, which is why he had the experience with dynamite. And he was convicted 3 times. The police found a receipt for 150 sticks of dynamite and detonators bought in Grants, New Mexico, which was between Oklahoma and Texas. He had lived in Oklahoma, he'd been married, recently divorced, moved to Texas. So if he bought dynamite, this was premeditated. So why the whole thing about enrolling his son in school? And the notes make no sense either. He's like, I'm going to wait for my wife. He's divorced. His wife isn't. I don't understand. I want more answers. Why was he out of prison? I mean, I know they didn't have the 3 strikes law back then, but come on. I had such a hard time finding a case. And now I want to know more. It didn't give enough info. And I also want to know if Orgeron had custody of his son. Why didn't he have the paperwork to enroll him in school? Why did they stay at a boarding house under an alias? Did he kidnap his son? Sorry. I don't want more details, guys. I'm so sorry. I like to dot I's and cross T's, but this time, this is all the info I could find. And I very much enjoyed the article. It's quite eye-opening as to how our world has changed over the years and how the internet has brought us all closer together, and we mourn together when these horrible, horrible things happen. And I don't think that the article is saying that's a bad thing. I think it's just saying that it hits home more because people around the world find out about these things. And so our reaction is what has changed, not the actual crime itself. And I agree with that. I also find it very interesting. So let me know what you think down in the comments. That's all I have for the Fisher King Part 2 and the bombing of Poe Elementary School. And remember, be kind to people, love your family, and I'll see you next time. Bye! Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.